Storm Ciarán is coming and it's going to bring exceptionally strong winds and some heavy rain, particularly to southern parts of the UK as we go through later Wednesday and into Thursday. Thank you for joining me. I am going to take a deep dive look into what we can expect with Storm Ciarán and a look at what's already happened recently with the rain and what might happen after the storm has passed. I'm Alex Burkill. Yes, thank you for joining me. If this is your first time watching one of these Met Office deep dives, we do them every Tuesday, so thank you for coming along this time. If you've often watched these, if you're a regular, then also thank you for joining us, as I hope you find what I'm going to go through over the next 20 minutes or so useful and interesting too. As always, if you have any comments, any constructive feedback, anything you've enjoyed, anything you'd like to see more of during these deep dives, do put those in the comments. I will be reading through the comments later. Remember, if you've enjoyed this, you can hit the like button. Remember to subscribe as well. And this one's an important one this week. If you think there's anything relevant and interesting and noteworthy that you want to make anyone you're friends with or make sure you share this content, because I am going to be going through the warnings and the impactful weather that we're expecting. And so if you think there's someone out there who would benefit from seeing this information, then do make sure you share it. It's the Met Office's job to help get the information when it comes to severe weather across to the public, and you can help us do that by sharing this content around. Before I get on to Storm Ciarán, which I am going to cover in quite some depth, I'm going to firstly look back at what's happened recently with some heavy rain that many places have seen over the last few days or so. Behind me you can see the satellite and radar image from Saturday afternoon, and there was a swathe of wet weather that pushed in across southern parts, and it's worth noting that this windy wet spell coincided with some high spring tides. I think it was around the third or the fourth highest of the year. So some pretty high tides, and that wet weather led to some coastal impacts and some flooding even further inland. We've seen some significant footage of some disruptive weather caused by the heavy rain that swept through across mainly southern areas, but did push further further northwards as we went through Saturday. And we continue to see more wet weather as we went through the early hours of Sunday too. And so it's this that led to some impacts over the weekend with some heavy rain and some severe flooding in quite a few places. After that went through then, as we went through the rest of Sunday, more rain for quite a few places. And then into Monday, there was actually a drier slot for some places. Notice across Scotland, there was a lot of fine dry weather through a big chunk of Monday and into Tuesday too, but it was a different story for Northern Ireland. Here, a lot of rain made its way in. And the thing to bear in mind with the rain that we saw through Monday across Northern Ireland is because of the position of a low pressure just here over parts of Republic of Ireland, the worst of the rain was coming in from the east, and so it was eastern parts that really bore the brunt of that heavy rain, and it's here where we saw the highest totals. And yes, the rain did ease after a time as we went through the middle part of Monday, but further heavy rain pushed through as we went through into Monday night. If I just run that forwards, you can see intense rain continued as we went through Monday night and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. We saw a significant amount of rain, lots of flooding across parts of Northern Ireland. Several sites had their wettest October day on record. Killowen, for example, reached around 75 millimetres, and Tracy-Slievenaman in County Down had over 100 millimetres in just a day. So that was an October record for those sites. So it really was an exceptionally wet spell. But it's not just been across Northern Ireland where we've seen a lot of heavy rain recently. It's been a very wet month for many places. Obviously, we had Storm Babette just a couple of weeks ago, which brought a significant amount of rain to eastern parts of Scotland. And I thought I'd have a quick look before we go on to Storm Ciarán at what we've seen so far this month in terms of rainfall totals. Now, the map behind me splits everything up into counties, and it's showing individual counties where they are in compared to records. So the lighter blues show that they're slightly wetter than average. The darker blues, in fact the darkest blues, show where these counties have already recorded their wettest October on record. I say already because this is data up to and including the 30th of October and doesn't include today's, the 31st of October's rainfall stats. But you can see many places across eastern parts of Scotland have had their wettest October on record. And notice also Nottinghamshire has also had its wettest October on record. Across the UK as a whole, already we've had around 134% of the average October monthly rainfall. Again, this doesn't take into account today's rain, so on the 31st, which will add that total up. So it will be more than that when we look at the full month stats. But Nottinghamshire has already had around 2.5 times its average October rainfall. So some places have seen such a record-breaking amount of rain so far this October. But back to the weather then, and let's run through the next day or so, because I think it's important. There is some significant rain around. So if I just run through the end of Tuesday, and there's this band of wet and windy weather that's going to come up from the southwest. If you're watching this on Tuesday, you may be about to head out trick-or-treating. All right conditions across the north and the east of the UK, but towards the south and the west, it's a wet and windy picture here. So if you are heading out, good luck avoiding the worst of the rain. But you can see that rain then pushes its way northwards, and that's important particularly for Northern Ireland. I mentioned how much rain parts of Northern Ireland have already seen in the last 24 hours or so. So some further wet weather here, perhaps a further 50 millimetres in some places, is likely to make ongoing issues worse. There could be some more flooding, some more disruption to travel, because it is going to be another wet night. Not quite as wet as last night when, some places saw 75 to 100 millimetres of rain, but another wet night nonetheless. Lots of rain then, strong winds pushing their way northwards across many parts as we go through the evening, overnight, and then Wednesday's an unsettled day. Notice some snow mixed in with the rain across parts of Scotland. This will be a high ground thing, so modest high ground of Scotland, likely to see some snow on Wednesday, and then otherwise plenty of showers around. And just before I dart on, actually, I just want to scroll back to Wednesday morning. A band of squally rain crossing parts of the southeast could bring some strong gusty winds, but also some intense rain, particularly as we head through the morning rush hour. So some impacts likely in association with that. So a lot of unsettled weather around through the next day or so, and that's all before Storm Ciarán arrives. You can see the beginnings. Oh golly, I've gone on too far, but you can see the beginnings of Storm Ciarán starting to push in as we go through later on Wednesday. But then let's look at Storm Ciarán then. What's causing it? Why is it going to be such an intense feature? Why are we getting so alarmed about it? And I will start off by showing us the pressure sequence. That's the wrong one. Here we go. If we look at what's happening, first of all, across the other side of the Atlantic, and if we get up our temperatures, I'll get rid of the pressure chart just for now, and what you can see over in North America is there's currently a huge temperature contrast. We have much colder air across northern parts, and in the south it's warm. Here it's warmer than average, and it's this huge temperature contrast that's invigorating the jet stream. It's a very strong, active jet stream at the moment, the other side of the Atlantic. If I just scroll across so that we can see the UK again. And you can see, well, it's very strong, the jet stream. We're talking around 200 miles per hour, and that is going to lead to Storm Ciarán invigorating, but it's not all bad news. In fact, the strength of the jet stream is leading to flights moving from west to east, so flying over the Atlantic from North America to Europe. They're actually able to utilize the jet stream, and some flights are taking around an hour less than normal because of the strength of the jet stream. They're just zipping across the Atlantic slightly quicker than they normally do. Interestingly, there are meteorologists based here at Exeter and Met Office HQ who forecast and plot the charts that the pilots, the airlines use to help forecast their flights, and are able then to utilize the jet stream. So it's all thanks to the work that we do here at the Met Office that they're able to make the most efficient journeys across the Atlantic. But let's get rid of the temperatures. This jet stream, the active part of it, is going to push its way eastwards across the Atlantic as we go through the next few days. And if I put the pressure sequence on now, you can see the low that is Storm Ciarán. Before I go on, actually, I just wanted to highlight it on the satellite image. If I scroll to the very end, so if we go to the most recent image, Storm Ciarán's around here. It doesn't look particularly exciting at the moment, nothing particularly impressive, but it is in here at the moment, and it's this, there's an area of low here developing, and it's this that's going to invigorate as it comes across the Atlantic through the next couple of days. So yes, as we run through, as we go through Tuesday, Wednesday and into Thursday, you can see the active part of the jet stream pushes its way eastwards across the Atlantic. At the same time, if I just scroll back quickly, you can see the low pressure centre, that is Storm Ciarán, pushes towards the exit of the jet, so the eastern side, this end of it, and it crosses over it as well. And it's this movement over this active jet stream that is going to lead to the low pressure that is Storm Ciarán deepening rapidly. It's going to go through something called explosive cyclogenesis. If you watch these deep dives regularly, you may have heard me talking about explosive cyclogenesis before. We had it with Storm Agnes. That didn't bring such strong winds to the UK, whereas this time, the Storm Ciarán is going to go through its rapid deepening just as it reaches towards the UK, as it gets very close. Now, explosive cyclogenesis is when the low pressure centre deepens by around 24 hectopascals or 24 millibars, depending on which one you use, in less than 24 hours. Now, Storm Ciarán is going to do that and then some. It's likely to deepen by more than 30 hectopascals in less than 24 hours. And by the time it reaches the UK, there's a chance we're looking at it being around the low 950 hectopascals. That's exceptionally low. These figures may not mean a huge amount to you if you're not a huge met head and a huge meteorologist, but trust me, that is an exceptionally low area, deep area of low pressure that's heading towards the UK. To put it into some context, I think, in fact, I pretty much know, we are going to record the lowest pressure in England in November on record. The previous record was around 959, and that was back in 1916. So our records do go back over a century. And I think, well, I know as we go through Wednesday into Thursday, we are going to see pressure lower than that in the low 950s in association with Storm Ciarán. The other thing to bear in mind with Storm Ciarán, and this is what's causing us a headache, is the fact that it hasn't gone through its rapid deepening yet, and it's not going to do so until it gets quite close to the UK. Why is that important? Because that plays a part in the track it's going to take. Usually we see our low pressures deepening out in the Atlantic. By the time they reach towards the UK, they're in a mature phase. As a result, it's relatively easy to forecast the track that the lows are going to take. Our models have a good understanding of what they're going to do. However, with Storm Ciarán, because it's deepening and rapidly so close to the UK, it's a little bit uncertain as to exactly what track it's going to take across the United Kingdom. It is going to come across us, but how far north, how far south it goes, that's the question mark, as well as how deep it gets. I'll come on to that a little bit more in detail, but just to run through, this is the Met Office global model, and you can see it brings the low that is Storm Ciarán across southern parts of the UK. Worth bearing in mind, other models have it a little bit further north, and other models have it a little bit further south. Why is that important? Well, the strongest winds, I've taken the jet stream off just because I didn't want that to confuse things, but the strongest winds will always be on the southern side of the area of low pressure. And so how far south or north this area of low pressure is depends on where we're going to see the strongest winds. If Ciarán is a little bit further north, like some models want, it will have the strongest winds across more southern parts of England, around the English Channel coasts. If it's a little bit further south, then the really strong winds aren't going to affect us as much, and it's going to be more of an issue around the Channel Islands. Coastal parts of France will see the exceptionally strong winds. And so there really is still a lot to play for in the detail as we get nearer to the time to Ciarán. So it is worth keeping up to date. But either way, that is going to push its way eastwards and northeastwards as we go through Thursday, and it's going to bring some heavy rain and some strong winds. So it really is going to be an exceptionally wet and windy spell. How much rain, how strong the winds? Well, let's look at that now. Here's a chart which we will be sharing on our social media later. So if you're on Twitter or X, as it's now called, we will be posting this for you to look at more detail. But we've highlighted the areas of greatest concern. So in this grey shaded area across southern England, southern Wales, this is looking at the winds Here, we're quite likely to see gusts widely 50 to 60 miles per hour, 60 to 70 miles per hour, perhaps around the coasts. Further north, it's not going to be quiet and settled, but nowhere near as impactful in terms of the strength of the winds as in these shaded areas. Then in this pink area towards the southwest, here we have the potential for 70 to 80, perhaps even 85 miles per hour plus. And it's most likely during the early part of Thursday, through from dawn to midday, that we're going to see the strongest winds. So strong, exceptionally strong winds impacting us as we go through morning rush hour. Then further east, we have a yellow shaded area, and that's going to be a similar strength wind, so 70, 80, possibly 85 miles per hour, but it's going to be slightly later on in the day, through a big part of the day, and those strong winds will continue as we go through evening rush hour on Thursday as well. So really difficult conditions because of the wind, but also because of the rain as well. Worth noting, there could be some very large waves in association with the strong winds as well, so they would cause further issues too. Like I said, there's not just the winds, there's the heavy rain to watch out for too. Lots of places likely to see a significant amount of rain. The purple area down eastern Scotland, northeast England, 40 to 60, locally 60 to 80 millimetres. And remember, so many places in this part of the world were affected by the heavy rain from Storm Babette. More rain likely for eastern parts of Northern Ireland, where we've seen such heavy rain recently that I've already talked about. Some rain for North Wales, parts of northwest England, and then a swathe of wet weather across southern counties of England and Wales in association with that zone of very strong winds. And it's here that we could see 40 to 60, perhaps even up to 80 millimetres of rain. Now, it's worth bearing in mind the timing that Storm Ciarán is coming through. That bit we're a bit more certain about. It's going to bring the worst of the winds and the heaviest rain as we go through pretty much daytime on Thursday. So it is going to arrive overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday, but people will be waking up. You may have plans on Thursday, somewhere to be, work, etc. People will be out and about, and it's because of the timing that it's coming through that we're likely to see significant impacts, which is why we have these warnings in force. I'll go through the warnings in a second. But it's also the time of year. There are still trees full of leaf. We're seeing drains being blocked by the leaves that are blowing off, and then leaves and branches are more likely to be blown around because of the time of year. And the ground is so saturated, so it's going to struggle to cope with more heavy rain that we're going to see. And there's the fact that with a saturated ground, you're perhaps more likely to see trees being blown over. These are the kind of impacts that we could see through due to Storm Ciarán. But I mentioned we have a number of warnings, and I wanted to go through these in a little bit more detail just because, well, I am aware that the warnings chart on our website, it's great, except when we have lots of warnings all out on the same days and they overlap a little bit, and it sometimes can be unclear as to when different warnings start and finish, etc. And so I just wanted to run through. So we do have a rainfall warning across parts of Northern Ireland through Tuesday night because of further heavy rain here, which I've already been through. Then moving forward, we have heavy rain across parts of Scotland, with areas still recovering from Storm Babette across this central slice as we go into the Wednesday morning. And also I mentioned that squally band of rain that's likely to affect the southeast as we go through Wednesday morning through morning rush hour. So we have a warning there for both wind and rain. Then running through, and then there's a break in the warnings for a time before we start to see the warnings in association with Storm Ciarán. So we have a rain warning, that comes into place first across parts of southern England and southern Wales. I've already talked about those totals, perhaps up to 80 millimetres in some parts as we go through Wednesday into Thursday. Then more rain warnings for northern parts of Wales. Then the amber warnings come into force, and initially it's this one in the southwest which comes into force first of all. And I want to highlight something now. If I put the winds on, which I can do by clicking this one, and if I just scroll back a second, before that amber warning comes into force, but we do have a yellow rain warning, and also a yellow wind warning, which I've tried to highlight by showing in a slightly different colour. The wind warning follows a similar shape to the rain warning, but goes up a little bit further northwards into East Anglia and doesn't go quite as far north into parts of Wales. But what you can see, as the low that is Storm Ciarán initially approaches, remember I said the strongest winds are generally on the southern flank of the low, but you can see it's coming up from the south. So initially, for southwestern parts of the UK, the strong winds will be coming from the south. But as the low pressure moves across, you can see the strong winds then push their way eastwards, and so we're going to see increasingly strong winds for southeastern parts of England. But then we get in the southwest, our winds are coming from the northwest instead. And what that means is in places that may be sheltered from a southwesterly wind, they're then going to be more susceptible to the northwesterly wind later on, and vice versa. So although you may be sheltered from a northwesterly wind, slightly earlier on in the night, you're still at risk of seeing some strong winds before the winds go around and change direction. So it's just worth bearing in mind the direction that the winds are coming from for where you are, depending on the time of day. But all that goes through, we have a rain warning across northeastern parts of England, more for Northern Ireland, and then the warnings eventually subside as we go through Friday, at least for the time being. I'll come on to the forecast for the weekend in a few minutes. So a lot of unsettled, exceptionally unsettled weather in association with Storm Ciarán. It's worth bearing in mind all the warnings that I've gone through, they're all at the time of recording. So I've recorded this on Tuesday afternoon, the 31st, it's Halloween. The warnings will be updated. They will be tweaked as we get nearer the time. Like I said, there's a bit of uncertainty in the forecast track that Storm Ciarán is going to take. I can look at that here. So here I have a couple of model outputs. On the left-hand side, I have the Met Office output. On the right-hand side, it's ECMWF. And what this shows, each of these dots indicate the position that several members from the Met Office model runs have highlighted where the low pressure is likely to be centred at midday on Thursday. And you can see there's a fair bit of spread, even the different parts. In case you can't make it out, here's the UK. I've just touched the screen, apologies. Here is the UK here. So there's a fair bit of spread. It looks like it will be across central southern parts, but it might be a bit further east, might be a bit further north. Similarly, we've got the same thing, but this time using the European model, the ECMWF. And again, it shows a relatively wide spread. The different colours of the dots show how intense, how deep the low is going to be. And all of this plays a part in how strong and how intense those winds are going to be. Like I said, though, there's the possibility that we could see gusts in excess of 85 miles per hour, which is exceptionally strong, and it is going to cause some significant impacts to southern parts of the UK in particular. Regardless, to be honest, of exactly where the low is going to be, it is going to be a very windy spell. Just how exceptionally windy, that is the question mark at the moment. The other thing then I quickly wanted to highlight, I've already gone through it in some detail, so I'll brush over this relatively quickly, but rainfall amounts, it is going to be a wet period. This is the 36-hour rainfall accumulations from 6 p.m. on Wednesday till 6 a.m. on Friday, and showing different model runs again. On the left-hand side of the high-res Met Office model, then the next one along is the Met Office Global model. The second from the right is the ECMWF, the European model, and on the right-hand side, GFS, the American model. And they all show that the rain's going to be similar locations in as much as Wales, southern England likely to see the worst of it. The heaviest rain, probably the greatest chance of getting 80 millimetres, perhaps a little bit above, will be over the Welsh mountains perhaps. But even parts, the moors in the southwest, looking at both the Met Office models, have exceptionally high totals as well. So it is going to be very wet, and it is going to be very windy as well. So the other thing that I wanted to go through before is we're often asked as meteorologists, we can forecast this, but what kind of things can you do ahead of and during the storm to stay safe and to keep yourself, keep others, and to keep your property safe? Well, now this is the time. You've seen the warning areas, you've seen the zones which I've highlighted where we're most likely to see those strong winds. If you're in those areas, now is the time to be starting to take action to protect yourself and protect properties as much as you can. We're talking simple steps. If you've got any loose items in your garden or around your house that you could secure or put away, now is the time to do it, to stop them blowing around and getting lost and causing impacts to problems, issues for other people as well. You could also, with the heavy rain coming, make sure your drains are unblocked. We've had a lot of leaves blowing around recently, and other things may be blocking the drains as well. So if you clear those out, then the rain will be able to run through and clear much easier, so we're less likely to see flooding issues. So they're the kind of things we could be doing now. As well as that, the advice during the storm itself, during those strongest winds, particularly in those amber warning areas, you want to try and stay indoors as much as you can. I know people have lives and people have things that they need to get done, so it's not always possible. But if you can avoid travelling and stay inside whilst those amber warnings are in force, then that is worthwhile doing, because it is going to be difficult out. There will be some difficult conditions. There's the risk of blowing debris. There will be disruption to travel. And when you come to travelling, if you do have to go out, there are a few things that you should consider. With heavy rain, you want to stick to the main roads. Try and avoid narrow roads, which may become a bit more susceptible to flooding. And with the strong winds, those narrow roads may be more susceptible to a tree blowing down, which could cause significant problems. Also, don't take any major risks. If you come across a road that is flooded, then turn around. It only takes around 30 centimetres, about a foot of flooded water, for it to be enough to move a car, and that could then move you into deeper water where you may need rescuing. So it's little things like this. Just be sensible during this time of unsettled weather. The other thing to bear in mind during the storm, in the aftermath, is it may have had a knock-on effect on buildings and other structures, so they may have become weakened. So just be aware, don't get too close to something that you think may look dangerous. There may be power lines knocked down as well, so stay away from those. And make sure you check on others. Other people may have been, if they're more vulnerable, may have been affected and unable to help themselves recover. So just check in on friends, families, and neighbours in case they need your help. Brilliant. Right, that's I think that's everything that I want to go through with regards to Storm Ciarán for now. We will be updating everything. We'll be keeping on top of those warnings. We'll be updating people with the 10-day trend tomorrow. I can't remember if it's Alex or Aidan doing it, but one of us will be going through the details. And like I said, across our social media and our website and our app, we will be updating those warnings as we get nearer the time. But let's have a look ahead at what we can expect once the storm has cleared away. So I'll just run through quickly. That's Storm Ciarán clearing away. Unfortunately, there's more unsettled weather on the way. I'll get rid of the jet stream. And you can see as we go through late towards the weekend, there's another area of low pressure coming in. So more unsettled weather is going to come. It's going to be wet. It's going to be windy again. However, look at this low. It deepens out in the Atlantic. And so it's a much, well, you might not have been able to see that. Car's probably in the way. But you can see it deepens out in the Atlantic. So by the time it reaches towards the UK, if I run that through, if we're looking at this low here, as it runs through, oh golly, that's going quite slowly, so I'm just going to skip a bit. By the time it reaches the UK as we go through this weekend, it's not going to be as deep, nowhere near as deep as Ciarán, and it's actually going to be quite a flabby low. There's no real definitive centre like we're seeing with Ciarán. As a result, I'm not expecting it to bring as much unsettled weather as what we're going to see through the next couple of days. Yes, there'll be some rain, there'll be some strong winds around, but it's not going to be as exceptionally wet. If I show you the rain, this is using our global model, bearing in mind, but you can see some heavy rain around as we go, just to go back. So going through Saturday, likely to see some heavy rain and more as we go into Sunday, and it will be windy too, but like I say, not on the same scale as what we can expect with Storm Ciarán. So yes, it is still going to be quite unsettled, but not as severe. But with places that are likely to see some flooding and some disruption because of Storm Ciarán, any further unsettled weather really won't be welcome. What happens thereafter? And well, I don't want to steal the thunder of the deep dive tomorrow, but let's have a quick look. And you may have seen these charts before. These are our probabilistic pressure trends. And what they show is model runs going back in time. So more recent model runs at the top, and at the bottom, model runs from further ago. And what they show is the percentage chance that we're going to see a certain type of pressure dominating. Blue means low pressure, reds mean higher pressure. And at the moment, it's 100% certain that we're going to see low pressure dominating. That's no surprise. We've got Storm Ciarán coming, and we've then got the other low pressure coming as we go through the weekend. But look at these reds. There are some hints of something perhaps higher pressure becoming more dominant as we go through the end of next week towards the 10th, 11th of November, towards Remembrance Day. That's when we could start to see something a bit more settled. Quite a bit of uncertainty about that. I emphasise the word could, because if we look at our confidence chart, confidence is very low. So if you've not seen this before, the hatchet line in the middle shows the average confidence in our forecasts. You can see the confidence drops, unsurprisingly, the further in time you go, the further you're looking ahead. And the black line and the shaded areas show where we are compared to average. So at the moment, confidence generally in the bigger picture is higher than average. And then it gets close to average as we go through towards the end of the week. And then it picks up again, so a bit higher than average as we go through the weekend and the beginning of next week. But then as we go through next week, towards that period where I highlighted there's a chance that we could see higher than or higher pressure, you can see confidence really drops. It's very low. So although there is a chance that we could see something a bit more settled as we go through the end of the week, it's definitely no guarantee. I think that's all I've had to say on everything. I hope that's been useful. I hope you are feeling a little bit more prepared for what is Storm Ciarán. And I hope you're able to stay safe and look after others and look after your property, because it is going to be quite a strong storm, particularly for southern areas where obviously the population is quite high as well. Like I said, we will have more information as we get nearer the time, so do keep up to date across our forecast on our website, on our app, across our social media. We'll have more videos going out on YouTube, so if you hit the subscribe button, then you will keep up to date every time we post a new video. And like I said at the start, if you have any comments, any constructive feedback, and I think you'd like to see more of in these deep dives, please do leave a comment and I'll try to read them and get back to them, and we'll look at what we can do differently going forwards. And remember to share. I've given a lot of useful information. I hope that might help people make better decisions. And if you're able to share that with someone to help them stay safe as well ahead of this storm, then that would be incredibly useful for everyone. That's it for me. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you again soon.